Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So let's continue on advanced operating system. So now we will discuss on the I/O management and the scheduling chapter. Okay. Okay. So this is what we will discuss. First, we will discuss on what is the I/O device. As you see on the von Neumann architecture, we have processors, then you have system bus, memory, and the I/O. Okay, so we are focusing on this part now. Okay, and we'll see the organization of the I/O function, the evolutions, and this is the latest one is using the DMA or direct memory access. Direct memory access is you read the data directly from the I/O to the memory, or write directly from memory to the I/O without involving the CPU. So CPU can be free, okay, to do something else. Okay. Then let's see on the operating system design issues, the design objective and logical structure of the I/O functions. Okay, so from this, then we can see what are the factors that involve on the operating system when they want to control the I/O. Okay, then we'll see the I/O bufferings. Okay, as the name imply, bufferings mean to temporarily save the values. Okay, it's used for the performance, to improve the performance. So we have single buffering, double buffering, and circular buffering. Okay, then we'll discuss on RAID, redundant array of independent disks from level 0 to level 6. So basically we want to have faster performance, okay, or we have some backup, okay, if one hard drive is failed, okay. Then the last one we discuss on disk cache, okay, and there are the examples on Unix, Linux, and Windows IO. Okay, so this is the learning objective for this chapter. Summarize key categories of I/O device on computers, discuss the organization of the I/O functions, explain some key issues in the design of OS, analyze the performance implication of various I/O buffering alternative, which is single, double, and circular, and understand the performance issue involved in magnetic disk access. It might be obsolete, but still on the server, when you want a higher capacity, normally you are using the magnetic disk. Although now we have solid state drive, okay, which don't have the performance, which is faster than magnetic disk, and might not we might not need to use the scheduling algorithms that will be applicable for magnetic disk. But still, we will learn this one, okay, because this one still used in the server for managing the data and so on. Then we see the RAID and the understanding of this cache, and lastly, various examples on Unix, Linux, and Windows. Okay, for the I/O, we can see that we have complexity of I/O design. Okay, so because we have a wide variety of device, if you see the von Neumann architecture, we have memory, and this is I/O. So the I/O, we have several types. Okay, can be written, read, and the speed also different. And you have also many variety, maybe USB mic, maybe webcam, and so on. Okay, or maybe you have some GPU, some additional key, USB disk, and so on. Okay, so we'll discuss the overview of I/O device and examine I/O from the operating system point of view. So we see how the OS can cope with the I/O, how the OS operating system manage the I/O. Okay. Okay, and lastly, we focus on magnetic disk. Is critical in modern system because this is before the emergence of SSD actually. Okay, so SSD does not have the issues. I mean, the SSD is faster, okay, than the magnetic disk, but also there's some the tensions maybe not as long as the magnetic disk. Okay. Okay, so let's start with the first section, which is the I/O device. Okay, this is the category of I/O device. We have three type category. The first one is human readable device. The human can see. Okay, so this is designed for interaction with computer users. So for example, you have printers to print, video displays, keyboard, and mice. So this is the human readable device, or human can see, can feel. Okay, what is the information? Okay. The other one is machine readable device. Only machine can do. So this is to use for interfacing with electronic equipment. For example, disk drive, USB key, sensors, controllers, actuator, mic, webcam, and so on. Okay. And lastly, we have the communication device. So this one to enable communication with remote device. We have Wi-Fi, we can use Ethernet, okay, and other things. Okay, or we can use modem. Okay, the key difference in our device, we have six key difference. Do we have different on data rates? Okay, so we have varies widely with difference of several order of magnitude. So we have from the slow until the faster one. Okay, so for example here, this I/O is much faster than the terminal I/O like the keyboard. Okay. Application. So device usage affect the OS software and its policy. So for example, this scheduling differs between file storage or whether you're using for virtual memory. Okay, so do remember that the part of the hard drive, part of it can be configured as virtual memory. So the scheduling algorithm for this one and the normal one, the for file storage, is different. So this for different application. Complexity control. The simple device for the printer require only basic control, while complex device like this need sophisticated management. Okay. Then unit transfer. Basically, there are two: stream data, terminal I/O, or block transfer like this I/O. Okay. And data representation. Device differ in encoding schemes, character codes, and parity convention. Okay. So then the last one will be the error condition. Okay, and whether we have the error correction mechanism on the device or not. Okay, so the challenge here is achieving uniformity in OS, how the OS can, so for example, read command, read function in OS or write command can be applicable to all the I/O because basically this is almost the same thing. So the movement of the mice, you can read. Of course, you cannot write here. Okay, we cannot write the mice or the mouse to move. Okay, so we just read here, but the instruction should be uniform for the OS. Okay, so read in the mice, the same thing like a read in the hard drive. Okay. Although you have the unit of transfer is different. One is stream data, the other one is a block transfer. Okay, so this is the data rate, for example, from the slowest is the keyboard until the fastest is gigabit Ethernet. Okay, so you have a 10 to the power of 9 bit per seconds. Okay, the other one that's faster maybe SSD is not mentioned here. So SSD and or USB disk. Okay, especially USB 3. Okay, so let's move on to the next section, which is the organization of the I/O function. How do we organize the I/O? Okay, we have three techniques to perform a I/O. The modern one is using, of course, DMA, direct memory access. So we can use program I/O. So the process just issue I/O commands and busy wait for completion. Okay, so this one simple but inefficient due to process idling during I/O. So for example, we have process A doing the computation, then doing the I/O, it will be blocked here until finish, and then continue the computation. And remember that this one is a 1,000 time than this length. Okay, so this is very long. Okay, so very slow. The I/O is very slow compared to the processor speed. Or you can use the interrupt-driven I/O. So the processor issues an I/O command and continues executing. So this non-blocking, or switch to the OS blocking. Okay, so this is more efficient than program I/O, but still processor dependent. The last one, we have the DMA modules, handles data transfer between memory and the I/O module. So as see here, the von Neumann architecture, as I mentioned earlier, we have the memory and we have the I/O. So the DMA will have a direct connection with this to read and to write, okay, onto the I/O device. Okay, so the processor only interrupted a bit, just for a few microseconds, and after the full block transfer is complete, okay, then because they need to flex, okay, what you call whether the I/O operation has finished or not to the processor, and this is most efficient and commonly used technique. Okay, so as you can see from here, this is the classification. I/O to memory transfer through processor. This is one using the processor means uh, you have the intermediate data go to processor, and then go to memory. Okay, so this is program I/O and interrupt-driven I/O. So still involving the processor. Or this one, no interrupt, program I/O, and this is using interrupt. And direct I/O to memory transfer does not involve processor. Okay, so and use the interrupt. Okay, so for efficiencies, DMA is more efficient than interrupt driven and more efficient than program I/O. Okay. So utilization higher for DMA because processor is free to do other things rather than doing that. And remember, this is the I/O operation is take this long. Okay, so you can imagine that we can use this I/O operation for other things. Okay, you can switch also to other process B, for example. Okay. Okay, so this is the evolution of the I/O function. First, we have the direct processor control, directly interact with the peripheral device. And then we introduce the I/O modules that handle device-specific details, for example, program I/O. And then we have interrupt-driven I/O. So I/O module signals the processor upon completion, so reducing idle time. Okay, so no need to attend. So maybe something like this. Okay, wait. Then after that, just interrupt. While waiting here, you can do switching. Okay, for program I/O, no, you need to wait. Okay, you need to wait that long. Okay, and then we have the direct memory access (DMA), but also we can see here we have the I/O processor. This is the specialized I/O processor execute I/O programs in memory. So processor is interrupted only after completing a sequence of I/O operations. Okay, or we have here the independent I/O modules with minimal CPU involvement. Okay. So the I/O module function as a standalone computer with local memory. So you can see this is similar like when you use the GPU. So GPU also has its own memory. So GPU, then you have video memory. Okay. So the impact of this evolution, the first is increased automation of I/O operations. Second one is reduced processor involvement, improve overall system performance. Okay, and this is the direct memory access. The DME modules take over the system bus to transfer data directly between memory and I/O device. Okay, so you have here the data count, data register, address register, and control logic. Okay, so this is the DMA module. Okay. The how the it does interacts. So the processor initiate the DMA operation. So the processor need to initiate. Okay, so it provide the control command with a read or write request. So read memory to I/O to memory. So this is read or write from memory to I/O. Okay, then specify the device address. Every device has its own address. So you know the address for printer, you know the address of Ethernet, you know the address of keyboard, and so on. Okay. And then also you need to provide the memory address. You need to prepare. Okay, this is the memory and this is the I/O device. So you need to specify which location in the memory. Okay, and also data count. How many data that it will be transferred, whether from here to here or from here from memory to the I/O. Okay. Okay, so the DMA will handle the entire block transfer. The processor can perform other tasks during the transfer, and when it complete, the DMA module send the interrupt. So the advantage will be reduce, of course, reduce overhead for I/O operation and enhance overall system performance. And this is the alternative of DMA configuration. You can put it here, single bus detached DMA. You can put it here, integrated DMA I/O, or you can put it here. Okay, and normally we use this one, okay, for the a more efficient configuration. Okay, this is a shared system bus. Okay, so the each word transfer requires 2 bus cycle request and then transfer. So this is the limitation. Okay, if you are using a shared system bus. Okay, then we have integrated DMA and I/O. So we have direct path between DMA and one or more I/O modules like this. Okay, we have another one DMA here. Yeah. So then we have DMA with I/O bus. So the DMA connect with the multiple I/O device. So only one DMA here. Okay. This is simplified system expansion by adding device to the I/O bus. So you add more here. This I/O bus you separate between system bus and I/O bus. Okay, I/O bus, and then you can read from here to memory, or you can write directly to the I/O. Okay. So the advantage of this is the reduced system bus contention. You can see now we have two bus. First is system bus and second one is I/O bus. Okay, and this improves efficiency, also scalability. You can add more here. Okay. Okay, so yeah, so this is the same. Okay, now let's see here operating system design issues. Okay, the key design issues for I/O system, there are two. The first one is efficiencies. You need to be efficient. And second one is generality. It should be general. Okay. So this objective aim to balance performance with simplicity in managing a diverse I/O operation effectively. Okay. So the I/O efficiency, the first factor is I/O bottlenecks because the I/O devices are much lower than the processors and main memory and often creating a performance bottleneck. Okay, and also the efficiency, we need to have multi-programmings that help improve efficiency by allowing process to execute while other wait for I/O. So process A run doing the I/O, then it can switch to process B. Okay, and we focus here on this chapter, this I/O focus dedicated to this I/O optimization. This is the critical area for improving overall system performance. This is before the imaging of SSD, of course. Okay. Generality, the aspect of generality, the first one, uniformity. So as I mentioned, you want to make it simple. So a read command function here can be applied to any device. Okay. Hierarchical design. So we can use a modular approach where lower level routines manage device specific details. So you can read comments the same, but the lower part will be different for each device, whether stream device or block transfer device. So it will be different on the lower part only. Okay. And we can provide the abstract interface like this, read, write, open, close. It can have the similar generalized function for all the devices. Okay. So this is the logical structure of the I/O function. Here, for example, local peripheral device, communication endpoint, and file system. Okay. So this is the user process. And then this is the so this is user process. And then for local peripheral device, you have logical I/O, device I/O, and scheduling and control, then hardware. Okay, similar with this one, communication port, you have communication architecture, device I/O, scheduling and control. So you can see here, this is almost similar. Okay, this one also similar. Okay, so the difference for file system, you have physical organization, file system, and directory management. Okay. Okay, so let's move on one by one. Local peripheral device. The first one is you have logical I/O. So abstract the device as logical resource. So provide a basic command like open, close, read, and write, and hide the specific of device control from user process. Okay. And the device I/O will convert high-level operation and data into device-specific command. So each device has its own command. Okay, so maybe it's different from hard drive to USB. Okay, and you can also utilize here the buffering technique to enhance efficiency and utilization. Okay, and the last one, scheduling and control, handles queuing and scheduling of I/O operation. Maybe you read, you instruct the I/O device to read so many times. Okay, but it need to following the schedule. Okay, so part of the scheduling is the I/O scheduling. Okay. Okay, and also manage the interrupts and collect I/O status information. So this one directly interacts with the I/O hardware module, ensuring the device-specific tasks are performed effectively. Okay. For the communication port, the difference is in here, communication architecture, the rest is almost similar. Okay. So replace the logical I/O module consists of multiple layers such as TCP/IP, handling communication protocol, and manage function like data encapsulation, error checking, routing, and session management. Okay, so that's the different. Okay, but the bottom two is the same. This is also the same thing. So we have here for file system, this we have the additional layers. This one especially because the two is the same. So the directory management will convert symbolic file name into file identifier. So this is another chapter which we will discuss, but and then also file system. So in this chapter we only discuss this one. Okay, physical organization. Okay, file directory management. You have the directory, and then from directory you have the file. Okay, you have file in every directory. Okay, and yeah, and also you can enforce on the file system access right and permission for file security. Okay, so only the specific user can read or can write. Okay, then the last one, we have physical organization. this one translate logical file references to physical storage device. So for example, you have your file PPTX. So this one will translate into the hard drive location, or this is the location of your file PPTX. Okay, so you have a file allocation table to map between your file into the actual physical location. Okay, so this one manage the allocation of secondary storage space and also main memory buffer for efficient data retrieval. Okay, as we mentioned buffer. So let's see now the I/O buffering. So let's see that a user process can be anything, can be PowerPoint, can be Microsoft Word, Chrome, and so on. We store a block of data from this one at a time, with each block having a length of 12. So the data area is 1000 to 1511. Okay, so this is the data area 1000 to 1511. So we can read the command, read the blocks of 1000 from starting from 1000 from the disk. Okay. So the program is hang up, waiting for the relatively slow I/O. Remember, the I/O is very slow. It interferes swapping decision by the OS. The future location must remain in memory during the course of block transfer. Okay, so we fix the location here. Okay, and this is what you call, you read from the hard drive. You want to move into the memory, but you specifically mentioned that this is 1000 to 1511. So this one will be locked, cannot be reused. Okay, and remember that it will be used for a long time because the I/O operation is long. Okay. So we do the I/O buffering, which minimize the inefficiency and optimize system performance by decoupling user process from direct hardware access constraint. So this one will no longer happens because we don't specify the address. You just tell how many it put into the buffer first, then put to the hard drive. Okay. So the challenge with the direct operation, process blocking, because the process now must wait for the I/O. Memory locking also, the memory cannot be reused, and risk of deadlock. Okay, there'll be a deadlock situation. Okay, so the benefit of buffering, then we can have the asynchronous data transfer. So input transfer can occur before even the request, and output transfer can occur after the request because you have the buffer. Okay, you have the buffer. Okay, it's a use idle waiting and enhance process concurrencies. Okay, and also improve memory management because the memory is not locked. Okay, the memory is not locked during the I/O operation. Okay. So we have the buffering for block-oriented device. We store data in a fixed size block, for example, the disk, USB key. So that data can be accessed by block number, or we can have for stream-oriented device, we handle continuous streams of byte without a block structure. So for example, terminals, printers, port, communication port, and mice. Okay. So this is the I/O buffering scheme. First one is no buffering. So in managed by I/O, then go OS, then is a process, and single buffering. So you have buffering here. Okay, in then move to user process, or double buffering. You can read first. While reading, you can do move to this one, then you can switch whether read or move to the user process. Okay, so you can see this is like twice as faster. Okay, or you can do circular buffering. You can have several buffer, and then you can switch read again. If empty read, after the read, then you can move to here, and so on. Okay, you have circular buffering. After it reach the end, I can check again whether this one has finished moving from reading and moving. So you can see it's the speed will be faster. And remember, this is to as a catching operation, because remember the I/O is very slow and the processor is quite fast. Okay. Yeah, so this is the single buffering operations. Yeah, use a system buffer in main memory to temporarily hold data during I/O operation. So the buffer itself is in the main memory. It allows a limited overlap between I/O and processing. So while you are moving here, then you can read. Okay. So for block-oriented I/O, and we have the stream-oriented I/O. Okay. So the input transfer to system buffer. For the output, data is copied from user to the system buffer before return back to the device. So you can also have this direction. Okay. For stream-oriented I/O like keyboard and so on, suitable. Yeah, so the buffer hold a single line of input/output, allowing process to resume quickly after line is processed. Or you can have also byte at a time. So you have line at a time, or you have a byte at a time, like sensors. So this is with the producer-consumer interaction model. So remember, you have producer and then consume, produce. Then you can take out, take out, consume. Okay, produce again, consume again. Okay. So the performance comparison without buffering, it will be T plus the execution time. So this is the I/O plus the compression time. Okay, so this is without buffering. So with buffering, the execution time per block will be the maximum between compression and this one. Normally the I/O will be slower. Okay, so you have taken the maximum between these two, and then plus M. Okay, plus memory copy time. So because I remember that like this is the buffer, and this is the user process A. Okay, this is the buffer. Okay, so the here you have maximum between the transfer from the I/O to the buffer, and from buffer to memory, you just here memory copy, mem copy. Okay, so you just do memory copy from the buffer to the user process. Okay. So you can see here the single buffer improve performance by overlapping computation and I/O. So you can overlap between computation and I/O. So while doing the I/O, then you can do a bit of computation here. Okay. Yeah, so we have the challenge will be increased iOS complexity, request tracking system, buffer assignments, and potential bottlenecks. Okay, then we can to overcome that, we have double buffering. So we have used the two system buffers. So instead of one, you prepare two place for buffer. Okay, in the main memory. Okay, allowing the process to operate on one buffer while the OS fill or empty the others. Can fills if you are reading, empties if you are writing to the device. Okay, so this one will improve parallelism in I/O operation. So the maximum, so then there's no memory copy. Okay, we don't need to wait for memory copy because it will be the maximum between the computation and the I/O time only. Okay, because this one is can alternate. Okay, between reading or copying to this one or moving. Okay, you can see this one can run at the same time. Okay, so you don't have memory copy, you don't count memory copy, just this one will be big enough. Okay, if you put here memory copy, it will be dominated by the T. Okay, so ensure continuous operations and prevent process stalling on I/O. So for example, if computation is larger than the I/O time. Okay, for stream-oriented device, still you have line at a time and byte at a time. Okay, the advantage maintain high device utilizations, improve efficiencies, but the challenge increase complexity in OS logic. So you need to manage this one. Remember, this is the switch. Okay, you need to synchronize when to switch. Okay, you can switch here and then you can use this. Or if you want to write the other way around. Okay, like this one. Okay, so you need to and also more memory may be required in our case is double. Okay, for the additional buffer allocation. Okay, but still the benefit is outweighed, so that's why we can put more. Okay, circular buffer. Use more than two buffers arranged in a circular queue. So starting and end, if you finish, then you go back here. Okay, so they provide additional buffering capacity to address the limitation of double buffering. So particularly for process with rapid bursts of I/O requires this I/O intensive requires reading. Okay. So each buffer in circular queue acts as a unit, and data flows smoothly even during high I/O bursts. So you take one by one. So you continue one by one. If you reach the end, then you go back to the first one. Okay. So this one implement the bounded buffer producer consumer. Remember this one. So you have producer, produce, and then consume, take the value. Okay. So the advantage is improved performance, of course, for high throughput application, for especially for I/O. Reduce the risk of data loss or process stalling during intense I/O bursts. Okay, so this is depends. Okay, you need to choose between single buffer, you have multiple buffer, or you use double buffer, or single buffer will be sufficient. Okay, so this also depend on data rates. Okay, so for example, if you are webcam, for example, you have the HD webcam, you want to have single buffer because then it will not be lagging, okay, in capturing the video, okay, for example, but increased complexity and requires more system memory to maintain the larger buffer pool, okay, so that is the disadvantage, okay. So you can see from here that the buffering help manage variation in I/O demand by temporarily storing data, allowing process and I/O device to operate more smoothly without constant synchronization. Okay, but the limitations, buffering cannot eliminate the delays when the average process demand exceed the I/O device surface capacity. Okay, as all buffer will eventually fill up, forcing the process to wait. So still, if the I/O is slow, yeah, the buffer will not help much. Okay. So this is significant in multi-programming because it boosts the efficiency and it also improves performance. Okay. So in conclusion, for buffering, it enhances OS efficiency and process performance, particularly in the environment with variable I/O and process demand. Okay. It is not a substitute for adequate I/O capacity. So still, it's better. For example, if you have uh, if you can have USB 3, use USB 3. Okay, don't use USB 1 or USB 2. Okay, because although you are using buffering, okay, so still the faster one, the higher capacity I/O is still preferable. Okay, but the buffer is will provide an intermediate solution or temporary solution. Okay, okay, so let's move on. As I mentioned earlier, this one will focus on the disk transfer. Remember that we have CPU, okay, and then we have memory, and then we have the I/O. One of the I/O is hard drive, okay. And of course, now we have faster alternative, which is the solid state drive, okay, or NVMe. Okay, so we have solid state drive, which is faster uh, than the hard drive. Okay, but still hard drive being used, so that's why we'll see. So the problem in hard drive is on here, it is slow. First, you need to do rotate here. So for server, we can the faster the rotate, then faster it can read the data. 10,000 RPM. We have 6,000 RPM. Okay, and we have 5,000 or 4,000 RPM. Okay, for the normal one, normally we use the 6,000 RPM rotation per minute. Okay, and then we have here try to see the track. It has so many tracks. Okay, so now we are learning the algorithm how we can better manage the position of the head here, because we want to minimize movement as much as possible. Okay, so that it can read faster. Okay, yeah. So this one is the movement of the disc. Okay, and this is movement of the head. So you move here. Oops, sorry. So you move here. Okay, you also move the head here. Okay, you move the head to read the track. Okay, so you have the sector, special sector. We have the track. We have the cylinder because we can have several plates. So to increase the hard drive capacity. Okay, so let's move on. So this scheduling of we have still the performance gap. The speed improvement of process memory has vastly outpaced that of this, which is remaining thousand of times slower. As you can see here, thousand of times slower. Okay, so you can imagine the CPU is like this, and the hard drive read is, yeah, maybe you stack long. You need to imagine it's 1,000 times than this size. Okay. So this ongoing challenge. Okay, so the research focus on the disk storage subsystem to mitigate this bottleneck. So this is the bottleneck. So it looks like you have the faster road, and then when you come to hard drive, it's like this bottleneck. Okay, you have the bottleneck. Okay, so when you do I/O operation on the hard drive, reading the file and so on, and it will be like this. Okay, now with the improvement of SSD, it's better. Okay, it's faster. Okay, the I/O capacity is higher for SSD. Okay. So in here, the scheduling technique are vital for enhancing this performance and as closely tied to the file system design, okay, which will not be discussed in this chapter, okay. So the key important here is we need to find the efficient scheduling strategies, okay, for reading the file, okay. Okay, so now let's see these performance parameters. We can see here the time wait for device, for channel, seek, rotation delay, and the actual data transfer. Okay, so seek is the movement of hard drive. So this is seek. Okay. So you want to which track? Okay. And then the rotation itself, how fast it is. Okay, 1000 RPM, 6000 RPM, of course, the faster, the small time that you need. Okay, and then the actual data transfer. So this is the timing of this IO transfer. Okay, so we have seek time, rotational delay. Okay, so this is to move this head to the desired track. Okay, rotation delay, how many RPM is your hard drive, access time, which is the summation of seek time, the rotational delay. Okay, so this is the access time, and transfer time, the actual transfer time. Okay. We have also the queuing delays. The IO requests often wait like this, and channel sharing. If wait for channel, wait for device. Okay. Uh, yeah, so we have the RPS used in high-end server to optimize efficiency. We have the channel releasing and RPS miss. RPS miss if the channel or control unit is busy. When the data is ready, then the disk must wait for another full rotation, introducing another additional delay. So you need to rotation one more time, and then you can read or you can write. Okay. So this is the critical matrix. As we mentioned here, we have the seek time, rotation delay, transfer time, and also the RPS miss. Okay. Okay, this is the seek time. This is in detail. So the component is start at time, initial time to begin the arm movement. Okay, and then the transfer time, time to cross tracks. Okay, you can see here. This is the read and write arm, and this read and write head. So you move between these. Okay, to read. Okay, so more than this, smaller, lighter, 3.5 inch, achieve average 6 time under 10 milliseconds. So only 10 milliseconds to move the track here. Okay, we have the rotation delay. Time for this to rotate the target sector under read write. So you have rotation delay like this. Okay, so for this is average delay is 2 milliseconds. Okay, so 10 milliseconds, 2 milliseconds. Okay, the transfer times is the byte to transfer and rotational speed in rotation per seconds. Okay, and the number of bytes per track. Okay, so this one is relation to the speed, faster rotation will reduce transfer time. Okay, so the transfer time relate with the disk speed, how many RPM, the faster, then the faster the transfer time. Okay, then after this we can calculate the average access time, which is 6 time plus average rotation delay plus the transfer time for the requested data. Okay, so this is the total access time. Okay, so let's see here the timing comparisons. Okay, for if you are using the sequential access or random access. What does it means? It means the sequential access if you are using the track, this one, the next one, the next one. Okay, so this is the sequential access. Random access, you do randomly. You move between the sector and the track. Okay, you move randomly. Okay, so for sequential access, you can see the example later on. You can follow up. It's around 64 milliseconds, and random access is 20,040 milliseconds. So this is 20 seconds. This is 64 milliseconds. Okay, millisecond. You can see, but this one, if you're using SSD, there's no issue on random access. Okay, so that's why we have here the fragmenter. So the red one here, you need to put it in the sequential access like this. You need to put the file in sequence so that it will be the movement will be minimum compared to you first part in here, although it is on the same sector. Second part in here, third part in here. So you are moving a lot of moving between the tracks here. Okay, so that's why the fragment will try to do. Okay, I'll put here number 1, number 2, number 3. Okay, so you defrag there. Okay. Okay, as you can see, sequence access is vastly more efficient. But again, remember this is for hard drive, not for SSD. For SSD, this doesn't matter. Okay, because there's no mechanical movement in SSD. Okay. Okay, then we now let's compare on these scheduling policies or these scheduling algorithms. Okay, so we have the what you call the objective is to minimize the seek time. Okay, so the common scheduling algorithm, first come first serve, shortest seek time first, scan or elevator algorithm, C-scan, the circular scan algorithm, random, this one will be the benchmark. Okay. First come, first serve, process request in the order they arrive. This simple but does not optimize the seek time. Shortest seek time first, select the closest track, okay, to the current head position. Depend on the current head position, and then you just move the track the closer to the head. Okay, then you arrange on the memory. Okay, then scan algorithm, move the head in one directions because you don't want to keep back and forth. Okay, so you just move to one direction, pick up the data. If you need to pick up the other data, then you can rearrange on the memory. Okay, and this also the same, move the head in one direction to the end, then jumps to the beginning and continues in the same direction. This is more fair than scan, but slightly less efficient in some cases. Okay, let's see one by one. Okay. Besides that, also we have several algorithms. Okay, so selection according to the request. This is selection according to the requested item. So we have random, first in, first out, priority by process. This is control offset the disk queue managements. Okay, because depend on the OS. OS might say that this is priority. I need this file earlier. Okay, so you can put the priority. You can read first. Okay, doesn't matter whether it takes longer time or not, but because it's priority, so you can read first, or you can have also last in, first out. Okay, then we see here shortest service time first. So this one will be high utilization, small queues, because the queue will be finished faster. Okay, because you finish, if you have 10 queue, you take the 5 may be finished in 1 second and the rest can be handled. Okay, then we have the scan, C scan, and SEP scan, and F scan. Okay, with this similar scan there. Okay. Okay, now let's see this one, the conversion of the first in, first out, or first come, first serve, first in, first out, shortest service time first, scan, and C-scan. Okay, so this is the movement of the hard drive. So you can see here, assume that the disk head is initially located at track 100. So if you put here, if you put like this, so you have the track number here. Okay, so for example, this is 184. And this is, for example, 18. So you move from track 18 to 184. Okay, so for the biggest and the first one, the track is already on 100 position. Okay, so how we can use the algorithm to optimize the reading process. Okay. Okay, so now let's see one by one. As you can see from here, average sys length is 55.3, 27.5, 27.8, 35.8. So you can see this is the fastest or the optimum one. But let's see the pros and cons later on. Okay. Okay. The first in, first out. Just let's see from here. So this is the requested tracks. Okay. Maybe remember that it's not. This is need to be defragmented. So this one is fragmented. Okay. So 55, 58. Although this is the same file. Okay. But this one is on the 55 location, 58, 39, 18. So you can see the location is scattered, okay, not in the increment position, okay. So not from 18, 39. If you do the defragmentation of the file, it will be 18, 39, and then the next one is 38, 38, 39, and so on. Okay, so it will be sorted, okay, if you are using the defragmentation, the fragmentation. Okay, so the head movement for first in, first out, from 100, this is first in, first out. You just follow this one, 55, 58, so exactly what is requested. Okay, you didn't change anything. Okay, so the total tracks traversed is 498 tracks. So because from here to here is 45, 55 to 58 is 3. You need to move 3 tracks. 58 to 39 is 19. Okay, you minus that. Okay, so you need to move 19 and so on. Until here, 38 to 184, you need to move 146. Okay, when you add together 49.8, we have a 9 movement. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. And then so when you average, this is 55.3. Okay. So this is first in, first out. Whatever the first in, then it will read that track first. Okay. Yeah, so there are other mechanism, for example, the priority and last in first out, but it's almost similar like this one is beyond our control. This is based on the OS. So for example, if this is priority, then you read this one first. Okay, read the track first. Okay, last in first out, so you reverse. Okay, 184, 38, 150, 160, and so on. So altogether, it will be the same. Okay. You can see the movement when you add, then it will be the same. Last in, first out. It will be similar like first in, first out. Okay. Okay. Sorted service time first. So the request tag is the same. Remember that sorted service time first means that the closest to the current one. Remember that the initial this head is on the track 100. So if you sorted, this is the sorted one. Okay, so 90 is closer to 100 because the initial is 100. Okay, so either you go to 58 or 90 from 100. Oh, sorry, 100 is here. Either you go to 150 or you go to 90. So you select from 90. Okay, so from 100 you go to 90. Then from 90 you can find this is 60 and this one is 32. Okay, so this is shortest. So you go to 58, then you go to 55, shortest to D1, 39, 38, 18. Okay, then after that, you move, you select this one, 150. Okay, 160, because if you select 184, it will be longer. Okay, from 184 minus 18 is will be bigger compared to 150 minus 18. So that's why you select 150 first. Okay. So you move there. When you add total 100 to 90, it will be 10, 90 to 58, it will be 32, 58 to 55 will be 3, and so on. When you add together, it will be 248 and 27.6. Okay, the average seek length. So you divide by 9. Okay, is it clear? So you find the shortest, the closest to the initial position. Okay, so closest to the current position. Current position is 100, so the closest is 90, then you move along from there. Okay. So the idea here is to minimize movement, okay, to minimize the movement, okay. We have here the scan or elevator. We have the variance, look, C-scan, and step scan, okay, but let's see this one, okay. You can read the details later on, okay, but let's see from here, okay. So this arm is moved in one direction, whether increasing or decreasing. So we assume this one increasing, okay, surfacing all outstanding requests until it reaches the end. And then after that, the direction reverse and the process repeat. So you just, if you see this, go here, go back here. Okay, go here, go back here. Okay. So the initial this head position, you have track 100, request tag is this one, sorted here, assuming increasing from 100, then you select 150, increasing 160, 118, 84, then after that you go back. Okay, after you going increasing, then you decreasing. You go up and go down here. Okay, so that's why you have here, the next one will be 60, 58 until 18. When you move here, this is 250 tracks. Two more than the SSTF. Okay, so the average is 27.8. Okay. Okay, now let's see. C-scan is circular scan. We have to one direction only. So instead of this, like this, the scan is like this, reverse. Okay, C-scan is like this. Go back. Okay, you go back from the beginning. Okay, so let's see here. 100, so assume increasing first, so it will be increasing, 150. So you increase this, and then you jump to the lowest track. Okay, so that's why you can see here, increase again. Okay, 18, increase again. When you add 132, 35.8. Okay. So the advantage here will be reduce maximum delay experienced by new request. If there is some new request, then it will be served fairer compared to the other algorithm. Okay. Okay. The another variation is n-step scan, and you have also f-scan. Okay. So yeah. So you have yeah, the n-step scan. The this request queue is divided into sub queue of size n. So you divided the, for example, 2-step, then you divide by this one. Okay, and then after that you use scan algorithm. What is scan algorithm? You move, you down, you move, you down here. Okay, that's the scan algorithm. Okay, the f-scan maintain 2 sub queue of this for this request. So this one will be 2 only. Okay, this one can be more. Okay, can be 3, can be 4, and so on. Okay, so each one will be scanned. Okay, each one will be scanned. Okay. Yeah, so for large n, the performance approach scan for n equal to 1, this one equal to first in, first out. Okay, if you have n equal to 1, then it will be first in, first out. Okay. Okay, so yeah, so the benefit here is reduce for this one, reduce risk of starvation and ensure fairness. Okay. Okay, so that's the this scheduling algorithm. Okay. Now let's move on to the rate. Okay. Okay, so let's continue. So we have now go to the RAID section, which is a redundant array of independent disks. Okay, so this one will address the performance gap between the secondary storage and processor by using multiple disks in parallel. Okay, so you have several disks, and you can configure RAID. Okay, redundant array of independent disks. The original abbreviation is inexpensive disk. Okay, so you can see that the various configuration will offer some performance and also reliabilities. Okay, so it provide either you want performance or you want the reliability. So you have the backup, you have mirroring, and so on. Okay, so the separate I/O request can be processed simultaneously if the data reside on different disks. So for example, if you have request this one, this part on this one, this part on this two, so you can have twice the data rate. Okay. And also this used for reliabilities, and the RAID is standardized with 7 level from RAID 0 to 6. Okay. The characteristics of RAID, we have three characteristics. The first one is logical drive abstractions. So the RAID organizes multiple physical disk drive into a single logical drive. So as if that although you have 4 drive, it's you can refer it as one drive. Okay. So as one single or a logical drive seen by the operating system. You have data striping is distributed across the physical drive using a technique called striping, which improve performance by enabling parallel access. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, if you have one big file, video file, one is this one is this two, for example, you can read in parallel. Okay, the second also you can configure for fault tolerance. Okay, so the redundant disk capacity is allocated to store parity information, so you can fix if there is some error using the parity information. Okay. Yeah, so this is the red levels. You have level 0 for striping and mirroring for refer 1. You have parallel access 2 and 3. The required is N to N. If you're using Hamming code, the M, N plus M. If you're using the bit interleave parity, you have N plus 1 only. You need to have additional one disk. Okay. And this independent access is this one is block interleave parity. Okay, this one also block interleave distributed parity n plus 1, and this is block interleave dual interleave parity. So that's why you have 2 here, n plus 2. Okay. So for data availability, this one and this one. Okay. For large I/O data transfer, this one and this one, and so on. Okay. Yeah. So let's move on. So RAID level 0, so provide data striping without redundancy. So you can see here, it stripe. This is this number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. Okay, so you stripe this. Okay, stripe 0, 1, 2, 3. So if you have file like this, 0, 1, 2, 3, then you allocate here to this one, this is to this 2, this is to this 3, this is to this 4. Okay, and so on. Okay. So this is no redundancy. This focus on the improving the performance, okay, or read access. So the data striping divide data into strips and distributed them across all these, and is ideal for application requiring high data transfer rate. Okay, if it is distributed like this, you can, if you have for this maximum, you can have 4 times. Okay, so this is the advantage: high data transfer rate and high I/O request rate. Okay. The use case here for non-critical system where performance capacity are more critical than reliabilities. Okay, for example, not for example for video editing or gaming in which you need to have a faster system. Okay, limitation: no fault tolerance and dependent on strip size. So it depends. The strip size, one big file, what is your strip size? Is it every megabyte, every 10 megabyte, every 1 GB, and so on? Okay. Okay. RAID level 1, you have backup. You can see here, this one and this 5 is mirror. This 2 and this 6 is mirror. 3 and 7, 4 and 8. Okay, so that's why you need to have twice. Okay. Yeah, so this one I think more expensive, okay, because you have data mirroring. The requirement for the hard drive is twice. Okay. Yeah, so but this is no parities. Okay, it's and we can also, yeah, so data streaming can be implemented, although it is not required. Okay, because you can do striping, or you don't need to do stripe. Okay, so you can have 0, 1, 2, 3, for example, like this. But this one also will be mirror 1, 0, 1, 2, 3. But normally for high performance, we stripe like in the red level zeros. Okay. So high cost and limited write performance. So the write performance is determined by the slower of the two disks. Okay, so depends if you have different speed for this for writing speed, then the performance will depend on the slower one. Okay. So use case for critical data, like for database, real-time backup, and for fault tolerance system. And this also can be used for read intensive, not the write intensive, but for read intensive environment. So you are reading only. Okay. For example, this one can be used for Netflix. For example, you are reading only from the hard drive. Okay. Okay, write performance comparable to single disk or RAID 0 due to parallel wires to both disks. Okay. Okay, red level 2, you have here the Hamming code 1, 2, 3. So that's why you add 4 plus M Hamming code. You have 3-bit Hamming code, then you have here. Okay, so let's see if you have uh, um, 8 data disks. Okay, then you have number of parity disk and number of data disk. The parity disk will be log 2 of 8, 3 plus 1, so you have 4. Okay, you have 4 for this. Okay, and so on. Okay, so the advantage, you have the error correction now, provide robust protection against single bit errors, making data recovery seamless. So you can recover if there's some error. High throughput also, if you do the striping, okay, you can have parallel access to this 1 until this 4. Okay, but this is high cost. You require additional for the Hamming code. Okay. And this is low efficiency for modern disks because modern disks have low error rates, making RAID 2 an excessive solution. Okay, it's also complex and obsolete. Okay, RAID level 3, similar to RAID 2, but requires only one parity disk. Okay, so you calculate one parity disk here. Okay, so for example, if you have the array X0, X1, X2, X3, and X4, okay, the parity calculated by this. So if X1 is failed, then you can reconstruct back, okay, the parity of um, the error. Okay, you can correct the error. Okay, so it has high data transfer rate, but poor I/O request handling in transaction-oriented environment because only one request can be serviced at a time. Okay, because you need to calculate again the parity. Okay, so this is best for sequential high throughput tasks, large file transfer, video streaming, and less effective for transaction heavy. So you have a lot of reading and writing because you cannot handle multiple simultaneous I/O requests. Then we have RAID level 4, use independent access where each disk operate independently. So data is striped across multiple disks with a dedicated parity disk. So you still have dedicated parity disk. Okay, so the first one here, pair with this one. Okay, second one, you pair with the second part there. Okay, so the parity provide fault tolerance. You can each calculate the parity like this. If the one is failed, then you can reconstruct the data using the parity and the other healthy disk. Okay, so but only one can fail, so that you can add the parity with this. You can recover back the data. Okay, so read performance is high. And write performance is suffered due to write penalty. So because you need to recalculate the new parity. Okay, so that's why it's a bit slower. Okay, so this is suitable for read intensive workload, but less effective for write heavy environments because you need now the parity disk will become the bottlenecks. Okay. Okay, so yeah, this is the advantage. The parity disk become the bottlenecks. Okay, RAID level 5 similar to RAID level 4, but parity is distributed. You can see here. Remember, the parity is what you call, it become the bottleneck. So you calculate here 0 and 3. Okay, 4, 5, 6, 7. You put the parity here. Okay, and so on. Okay, you put the parity here, parity here, parity here, distributed and repeat it again. Okay, the first one will go here, second one go here, third one go here, fourth one, and fifth one. Okay, something like that. Okay. So the read performance is high. Write performance is improved because now you distributed, no longer bottleneck, but still incur a write penalty because now you need to update also the parity. Okay, this advanced no single parity bottlenecks suitable for mixed read write environments. Okay, but write performance is still slower than RAID 0 or RAID 1 due to parity calculation. Okay, when you write, then you need to recalculate back the parity. So the application for RAID level 5 is when require a balance of read and write performance, such as database, file server, and web server. Okay, so we can use RAID level 5. Okay, last one, RAID level 6, similar to RAID 5, but now we are using two independent parity calculation. Okay, so you have P and Q. You have additional one. Okay, so if one is fail, this one is fail, then this one can as a backup. So that's why you need to have n plus 2 this. Okay, so it can tolerate the simultaneous failure of two disks at the same time. Okay, so use the spread parity algorithm. You use exclusive OR. So the read performance is comparable to RAID 5 because it's distributed. Okay, write performance slower than RAID 5 because now you need to calculate two parity blocks. Okay, two parity blocks P and Q. Okay, but the advantage, of course, high fault tolerance. Instead of one failure, now you can handle two failure. Okay, data availability extremely reliable for critical system with high uptime requirements. Okay, the disadvantage, of course, the write penalty, because now you are writing to two priority blocks. Okay, the application for mission critical system where data loss is unacceptable, like enterprise database, or you have the banking transaction, yeah, like this one, financial. You want to have this RAID level 6. Okay. Okay, so the last section, beside the example, is the disk cache. So this cache is a buffer in memory that temporarily store this sector to reduce access time. So this is similar like the previously the buffering, IO buffering. So, but this is specific for this cache. In fact, now we have I think Western Digital introduced something called SSHD, solid state hard drive. So you have, for example, 1 TB hard drive, and then you have similar like USB or SSD, but this one only 8 GB. Okay, so this one act as a buffer. Okay, so the purpose is to improve I/O performance and to exploit locality of reference. So if this one already in the buffer, it will be faster compared to reading to the hard drive. Okay, so yeah, so the mechanism when I request is made doesn't check if the sector is already in the disk cache. Okay, in this case, then you have here the main memory part of it, then you allocated as buffer. Okay, so you are read here. Okay, and if this on this cache, then this is cache hit. If not in the cache, then cache miss. So still you need to fetch from the disk. So the benefit, reduce the disk access time, because if you are experience cache hit, then you need you read from the faster main memory. Improve system performance, optimize sequential reads. Okay, the drawbacks is memory overhead because now you need to allocate some memory for buffering. Okay, and also data synchronization. Especially if you write here in the buffer, when do you need to write into hard drive? Okay, so there's a data synchronization. Reading is okay, but whenever you write, then you have the dirty mark. Okay, similar like other cache operation. So the common in OS, database, file system to enhance data access efficiency. Normally we pair it with the algorithm like Liz recently used to manage which data stay in the cache. Okay, so cache design consideration. Option include to memory transfer or using shared memory with a pointer. So the shared memory letter save time and enable shared access. Okay, the strategies. So this one we can use various algorithm. Least recently used, least frequently used, or frequency based replacement. So frequency-based replacement means divide the cache into section, new, middle, old. Okay, so if you have buffer, you divide it into new, middle, old. Okay, so avoid reference count in the new section to mitigate the misleading counts. Okay, this is frequency based replacement. Then the ensure block in the middle section have a chance to build up counts before being eligible for replacement. Okay, so this is the frequency based replacement. Okay, so the replacement timings we can have whenever you write in the buffer, then you can put on demand. So replace a block only when required, or pre-plan, release multiple slots simultaneously, optimizing write back operation and seek times. Or you can write, wait, and then if it is almost full or almost all marked dirty, okay, or change the data here on the buffer, then you can put it back on the hard drive. Okay, this is replacement timing. Write back consideration, if a block is updated, it must be returned back to the disk before replacement. Okay, so it need to be synchronized, otherwise you will lose your data. Okay, practical implication: choose an optimal replacement policy, which is this one, 1, 2, or 3. Can significantly enhance cache performance. Okay. Okay. As I mentioned earlier, then this is the best algorithm. So we have new sections, this first in first out, and old section. Yeah, so the issues with simplified replacement like first in first out, blocks aging out of the new section often have low counts, making them easily candidate for replacement. Okay, what does it mean here? It means that the new one that is just recently added, the use count is still low. Okay, the use count is still low. So when the algorithm see, oh, this one is least recently used, this one is not used that much, so I replace this. Okay, so we need to allow some time for new section to accommodate the count, the real count. Then we can see the algorithm will behave fairer. Okay, so the refund frequency replacement, the stack is divided into 3 sections, new, middle, and old. The new section counts are not incremented, so isolating temporary locality effects. Middle section block can build up reference count over time before entering the old section. Okay, so and the old section only block in this section are eligible for replacement. So you can see here the new section and then the old section. This one can be replaced. Okay, this one can build up reference count. Then after that, you can move to the old section. So you move to here and then move to here. Okay. Yeah, so you can see this one, the least frequently used challenge and frequency-based replacement challenge. Okay, the simulation result, the refund frequency-based replacement, this is the frequency-based replacement in which you have the 3 sections, outperform both simple least recently used and least frequently used. Okay, it handles locality of reference effectively and reduce the risk of prematurely replacing frequently used blocks. Okay. Okay. For the performance consideration, we have miss ratio, how many it miss. Okay. So this is the primary performance metric determined by locality behavior of this reference, by replacement algorithm, and by the cache size and other design factors. So you can decide the cache size here, how big is for the buffering. Okay. So the study on recently used saw significant performance variation across system. So it's not consistent. So you have a variation across Unix, FAC, and IBM. Okay, the function-based replacement, it indicate better performance than recently used with identical reference pattern cache structure. So it indicate better performance. So and difference in workload or cache setting can skew comparative result. Okay, the critical factor because of that is the exact reference pattern and block size impact performance outcome. So it depends again. What's the block size? Okay, and then what is the reference pattern? The reference pattern is the request, a reading request. Okay, reading request that you put. Okay. Okay, so this is the this cache performance result using recently used. Yeah, so you can see here that you have the miss ratio decrease as cache size increase. This is the cache size, this one. Okay, the FACS Unix, and this is IBM MVS and IBM SVS. Okay, so for similar cache size, the miss ratio is lower on Unix than IBM. Okay, so yeah, so you can see here, this is lower compared to this one. The disk cache miss rate means that miss rate mean then you need to read from the hard drive, not from the buffer. Okay, so the key takeaway, the listener use is effective but sensitive to workload and also system architecture, depend on vary from system to system. For the frequency-based replacement, it depend heavily on the workload characteristics and replacement strategies. So making complete experiment with context depends. So depend on the context. Okay. So yeah. So yeah. So this is the key takeaway when you compare between IBM VM, IBM VS, and Fetch Unix. So this is the cache size, and this is the this cache miss ratio. Okay. Okay, so if we finish this chapter, and this is just an additional example on Unix SVR version 4. You have special file for device, okay, in Unix, okay. Yeah, so and you have uniform interface. You have two type of I/O, buffer and buffer I/O, and so on. Okay, you can read for Unix. Okay, and for Linux, the difference, okay, you have different scheduler. So you can see here, Linux elevator scheduler is default in Linux 2.4. Elevator is the scan. Okay, remember the elevator, you go up and down. Okay, like elevator, up and down. Okay. So this you're using a variation of loop algorithms and so on. And you have here replaced with deadline I/O schedulers and so on. Okay. So this is an example on Linux. Okay. And then yeah, so then we have also in Windows. Okay, in Windows you have I/O managers, cache manager, file system driver, network driver, hardware device drivers, and so on. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so on summary, we have discussed the I/O architecture layers, and we have discussed the buffering. We have discussed this I/O performance, including the scheduling algorithm, first in, first out, okay, or first come, first serve, first in, first out, shortest service transfer first, okay, scan algorithm, C-scan. Okay, so C-scan is not elevator, so you go up one direction only. Okay, and yeah, so sorry, this is for this scheduling. This I/O performance is crucial for yeah what you call crucial because this one of the bottlenecks. Okay, if you see here, computer is faster, memory is faster, the disk is slower. Okay, so that's why it changed. Recently it changed to SSD. So SSD is faster, but still slower than memory, still slower than uh what you call the CPU. Okay, but on SSD there is no defragmentation issue because the random read or sequential read is the same in SSD. Okay, you don't have the moving head. Okay, then you have this scheduling algorithm, you have this cache algorithm. Okay, so the key takeaway for this chapter is efficient I/O management is vital for system performance. Of course, you can see here, anything that we save, anything that we run is saved in the disk. So the disk will be a determining factor whether you feel that the performance is good or not good. Okay, as well as buffering, disk scheduling, and caching. Okay, so thank you. So we'll see you again on the next chapter. Thank you very much.